we're going to delve into the Americans with Disabilities Act by looking at the on-demand transportation template that we get from National RTAP. And we will go over the federal definitions between on-demand and fixed route transportation, because I get questions on that a lot. People get confused and they think, or not on demand, sorry, demand responsive, I should say. People think that, hold on, there's the lobby. Admit. Okay. People often think that they are not demand responsive when they are. So we will talk about that. Oh, now it ruined my slides here. Let me fix this. Okay, now I can see the lobby and my notes. Okay, so we'll talk about that definition and the difference, and then we will briefly discuss the Title VI Civil Rights Act and what you are required to have to comply as a federal grant recipient. We will also look at an example of an agency website or some screenshots of websites that show good equal employment opportunity statements. And we'll talk about the minimum requirements for that. This webinar aims to provide insights into the legal frameworks that guide our efforts in ensuring accessibility, non-discrimination, and equal opportunities for all members of our community. Okay. And it won't change. Okay, so the Americans with Disabilities Act is a comprehensive civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including employment, education, public accommodations, and transportation. It was enacted in 1990. And in the context of transportation, it mandates accessibility requirements for public transportation services to ensure that individuals with disabilities can travel safely and independently. So there are key provisions that you must have in your ADA plan when it comes to transportation. And I'm going to read through each of these four. The first one is accessibility standards. The ADA establishes specific accessibility standards for vehicles, facilities, and infrastructure to accommodate individuals with disabilities. These standards cover features such as wheelchair ramps, lifts, designated seating areas, accessible signage, and tactile indicators for visually impaired passengers. Number 2, paratransit services. The ADA requires public transit agencies such as UTA to provide complimentary paratransit services for individuals with disabilities who are unable to use fixed route transit systems due to their disability. And again, that is when there's a difference there. So we'll talk about the difference between fixed route and demand responsive, and why most of your agencies, what you provide is demand responsive. Because if you were providing fixed route, you would be required to run paratransit services. Reasonable modifications, this is a big one. Public transportation providers are required to make reasonable modifications to policies, practices, and procedures to accommodate the needs of individuals with disabilities. This may include assistance with boarding and disembarking vehicles, adjusting schedules, or providing alternative transportation options. And last, communication accessibility. Transit agencies must ensure effective communication with passengers who have hearing or speech impairments. This may involve providing accessible information in alternative formats, installing visual displays or announcements, and training staff to communicate effectively with passengers with disabilities. Overall, the ADA's transportation provisions seek to remove barriers and improve accessibility for individuals with disabilities, enabling them to access essential services, employment opportunities, education, and recreational activities within their communities. By promoting equal access to transportation, the ADA plays a vital role in enhancing the independence, mobility, and quality of life for people with disabilities.
Mhm.
Let me mute everybody. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the difference between fixed route and demand responsive. A fixed route transportation system is a system of transporting people where a vehicle is operated along a prescribed route according to a fixed schedule. Demand responsive is any services transporting people, which is not a fixed route service, including dial-a-ride, taxi, van pool, route deviation, and private transportation services. Now, the main, well, here, let me do the other definitions, then we'll come back to fixed route and demand responsive. Route deviation, ADA complementary paratransit is comparable origin to destination service required by the ADA for persons with disabilities unable to use fixed route transit, which is required for public transportation providers such as UTA. Route deviation is a system that permits user-initiated deviations from routes or schedules. And microtransit is connection to local fixed route by transportation network companies, shared mobility service, or taxi. And an example of that is UTA's VIA service. So the definitions of fixed route system and demand responsive system derive directly from the ADA's definitions of these terms. Some systems, like a typical city bus system or dial-a-ride van system, fit clearly into one category or the other. Other systems may not so clearly fall into one of the categories. Nevertheless, because how a system is categorized has consequences for the requirements it must meet, entities must determine on a case-by-case basis which category their systems fall. In making this determination, one of the key factors to be considered, I keep having to mute, I'm sorry. Nevertheless, because, where was I? In making this determination, one of the key factors to be considered is whether the individual, in order to use the service, must request the service, typically by making a phone call. So that is one of the key indicators. Now, for most of you, they are already a client, and that is also a private transportation system. So you would not be running a fixed route, and that is why you need an ADA demand responsive plan and not an ADA fixed route plan. So the ADA defines fixed route as it's public, anyone can jump on and off at any time. The schedule is accessible to the public. When you're talking about just your clientele, even if it's going the same route every day, right? They called you at some point to get enrolled into your program. So then it is a demand responsive system. With fixed route service, no action by the individual is needed to initiate public transportation. If an individual is at a bus stop at the time the bus is scheduled to appear, then that individual will be able to access the transportation system. With demand responsive service, an additional step must be taken by the individual before he or she can ride the bus, i.e., the individual must make a telephone call. So I hope that that helps clear up those definitions a little bit more. And in this little picture here, I kind of like it because it shows fixed route is a bus and a person there. Demand response, they have a telephone. So that's how you can remember the differences between those. Okay. So think about what service type you provide and what are the service requirements for that type. If you are a fixed route public transportation service, you must also abide by all of the ADA regulations that a public transportation system such as UTA has to abide by, which also includes having a paratransit fleet and running a paratransit program. So most of you are demand response, okay? Okay, next I'm going to talk about ADA driver training. We require all of your drivers to take the National RTAP ADA driver training course as part of their required trainings, or a similar approved course if you don't use the National RTAP. This training provides guidance on ADA sensitivity, and you can find it at this website down here, nationalrtap.org. Actually, this is the full toolkit website, and I will show that to you. They have a full toolkit that has everything you need to know. The training is in the To the Point training, or the e-learning, the e-learning place. But the National RTAP ADA toolkit is where we get our sample templates that we give you to create your ADA plan. And they also have examples of policies. So let me pull that up really quick. Oops. Oh, here we go. We'll just do this. Okay, so this is the ADA toolkit. And over here on the side, they have regulations, guidance, general requirements, and then demand response requirements, accommodating riders using mobility devices. They cover a lot of the topics that you have to cover in your plan. And then this is the demand response service sample policy. And this template is great. This is the one we provide you because it walks you through everything that your ADA policies must cover. It has all the definitions that you need, and it will walk you through. So you either have to put this or you can have this in your policy. And then it has little notes here. Remember, lift cycling is part of your pre-trip inspection and is recommended. So it has little notes. This is a really awesome template. We don't have one this good for Title VI, but the ADA, it should be pretty easy for you to meet the standards because we have this great template that National RTAP provided. They have other templates here: route deviation service, commingled service, paratransit service. And then since I'm here, I'll just show you guys their other toolkits. Because they have other policies that you can use, like the Transit Managers Toolkit, to help you with all of your policies to make sure that you're meeting a lot of the federal requirements. Grant compliance, they have a whole section on that. 5311 and then 5310. They have a whole section on 5310 specific. So this website is really great. I highly recommend bookmarking it and going there when you're trying to develop your policies and plans to make sure that you're meeting requirements. Okay, let me get back to the presentation. Okay, and then okay. Oh, I was supposed to review the sections in the template. Sorry, I went too fast. Let me go back. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm going to go back to the ADA toolkit. And you can download the full toolkit here. But we're just going to look at the on-demand, or I keep saying that, demand response, on-demand. Same thing in my head. Okay. So the purpose of this document is to provide rural public transit agencies. National RTAP is based on rural public transit agencies, but you guys can still use their templates. It's a great resource. With a sample of a written ADA policy for demand response service. This sample policy template is appropriate for transit systems. Anyway, so these have the things that your plan must cover are down here. So your plan must cover recruitment and employment, facility and vehicle accessibility. Now, if you have people with disabilities that are accessing your facilities, you probably already know that you do like an ADA checklist that goes through that your facility meets all of those. Since we don't do a lot of facility projects, we're not doing construction on your facilities, we don't require that checklist, but some other projects that you do with different grant organizations or different grants might require that of you to show that your facility meets the ADA standards. This one is more transportation focused. Vehicle and route assignments. So you must state that all of your vehicles are accessible or that you are giving equal opportunity accessibility. So what did they call it? Sorry, let me go back. Reasonable modification. No, that wasn't it. Anyway, service that is equal. So if not all of your vehicles are accessible, you have to ensure that you are providing the same service to people with disabilities that you're providing to people without disabilities. So that comes to response time, fares, geographic area, hours, that kind of thing all has to be the same across the board. You also can't deny trips, or if you are denying trips, you have to track whether or not a rider was denied because the vehicle wasn't accessible or just because your transportation program to people just for accessibility, and you need to track that. Maintenance of accessible features. You have to maintain your accessibility features on your vehicles in operative condition. If we do a vehicle inspection and your lift is not working and you didn't, and maybe it hasn't been working for months, that is a huge problem in the ADA. You have to have a working, operating vehicle with a lift or a ramp to receive 5310 funds. And you have to keep that asset working because, again, if you get someone in a wheelchair that requests service, you can't say, oh, well, we have accessible vehicles, but all of our lifts are broken. You're denying equal opportunity to that transportation program, okay? And we require lift cycling as part of your pre-trip inspection. And we also have you report your lift cycles in Ride Pilot. So that helps us know that you're maintaining those lifts and that you have accessibility features on your vehicles. Drivers are required to report lift or ramp failures immediately. Vehicles with inoperative lifts will be removed from service and replaced with an accessible vehicle until the inoperative lift is repaired. For vehicles equipped with ramps, it may be possible to continue in service as long as the ramp can be and is deployed manually when necessary. If an inoperative ramp cannot or is not deployed manually, the transit agency will apply the policy for a vehicle with an inoperative lift. So everyone has different policies of what they will do if that happens. Some people will keep an accessible vehicle in the lot that's not running trips so that if one that's out breaks down, they can go and transfer the passengers onto the other one. Or, use it manually to get everyone off and then leave the vehicle there and have a tow truck come. Everyone has different policies, but make sure that you have a policy that covers what your drivers are supposed to do if a lift breaks or if a ramp won't deploy. Just make sure that you have those policies and that you follow them and that your drivers know what they are. Wheelchair accommodation. All accessible vehicles need to meet or exceed the requirements. Transportation providers are required to carry a wheelchair and its user as long as the lift can accommodate the size and weight of the wheelchair and its user, and there is space in the securement area for the wheelchair on the vehicle without blocking the aisle. If a vehicle lift ramp and securement area cannot accommodate the mobility device, then you need to have another alternative for that. So here it says select appropriate wording depending on your agency policy. It is not required under the ADA regulations, and for safety reasons, your local policy may wish to prohibit personnel from operating a passenger's wheelchair. So you need to have your own policies on if the driver can help operate the wheelchair to get the person on or off. And you need to have policies about what to do if you can't accommodate that wheelchair. If it's too big, if it weighs too much, make sure you have policies that cover that and that you're following them. Same with wheelchair securement. Because you're allowed to have different policies. So here it splits it up. Either you do not require that wheelchairs be secured on board the vehicle. However, the driver will secure a passenger's wheelchair if requested, or your policies require that all of your wheelchairs are secure. Securement of wheelchairs is the responsibility of the driver, so you have to make sure that your drivers are trained in proper operation and securement of the equipment. IRSTA also often does trainings on securing, so it's a great idea to send your drivers to the IRSTA trainings if you want them to improve on that. And when they do the bus rodeo, they test them on their securement skills. So that's a great thing to have your drivers participate in. So I think we've covered, you have to include how you accommodate portable oxygen, service animals. Remember, your drivers cannot ask for proof of the qualifications of the animal, but they can ask what tasks the animal has been trained to perform. Staff training, rider information. So these are all of the minimum policies you have to have. You are welcome to add more policies to this ADA plan. Reasonable modification policy. Now, this is a big one that the ADA requires, and you must have it in your plan. If they submit to you a reasonable modification request, then you need to have policies to accommodate that. UTA, for example, we have a reasonable modification request form that people can fill out, and then we have a policy on how long we have to review it and how long we have to make that reasonable modification and things like that. So make sure you have policies in place for reasonable modifications. So this walks you through that. You can only deny requests for modification if they meet these. And there are guidelines for implementing specific policies. And then they go down. This is again the equal service. Passenger assistance, that's the last one. Demand response services typically provide curb to curb or door to door. Drivers can assist riders with disabilities in boarding. You should also have your own policies on that. If you're doing door to door or curb to curb, you might have different policies on how your drivers are allowed to help them or what they're supposed to do, because everyone does those a little differently. Okay, that's pretty good. We went through that. Okay, and then also, this guy, Jess Segovia, I think I'm saying his name right. He calls himself the ADA guru. He came to Ersta last year and did a presentation. He is really great, and he can help your agency make sure you are ADA compliant, because I'm not an ADA trained officer, right? I'm not the expert. We do have some experts at UTA, which I will give you their contact information at the end. But Jess Segovia is also a great resource. He's been helping write ADA policies, and he also can give, I think he gives legal advice when people are being sued for ADA issues as well. He also has expertise in subrecipient oversight support. So he is a great person to reach out to. I know I've heard he's expensive, but if you need him to do training, that is a 5310 operating expense because it's helping you be compliant with your program. So just consider that. All right, we're going to move on to, oh, and Susie is doing a training with her staff with him. So maybe after that happens, she can give us some feedback on how it went. So another thing I want to talk about is EEO. So there are two different types of EEO programs, and then I'll talk about what we check for at a site visit. If you employ 100 or more transit-related employees, or if you request or receive capital or operating assistance, oh, it cut it off. It's the same in excess of $1 million in capital or operating, then you have to have a full EEO program. If you employ between 50 to 99 transit-related employees and request or receive capital or operating assistance in excess of 1 million in the previous federal fiscal year, or request or receive planning assistance in excess of $250,000 in the previous federal fiscal year, then you can do the abbreviated EEO program. Now, we don't know which of those you fall into because we only provide the 5310 federal. We do look at your financial statements, but you should know if your agency is big enough to need a full EEO program. What we check at, or sorry, here are the differences. So the EEO program, you have to have a statement of policy, disseminate the information. You have to designate a person who's responsible for your EEO program. You have to analyze the data. You have to have goals and timetables. I think you have to report annually. Abbreviated EEO program is a little bit less. We only check at site visits that you have the EEO statement. And so that is this, go back, sorry. The statement of policy. So that is what we check for, that make sure that it's on your website or that you're including it in every employment posting, because that is the minimum. If you receive federal funds, you have to at least have a statement of policy. The EEO statement must say something like, your company is an equal opportunity employer, along with a statement of non-discriminatory practices in every job ad. For 5310 purposes, it must be on your website along with your ADA and Title VI plans. Here's an example. We're an equal opportunity employer. All applicants will be considered for employment without attention to race, color, religion, sex, sexual identity, gender identity, etc. And I've seen people make that list longer. I've seen people change that, and I'll show you some other examples of what some agencies have. So EEO, we just touched on that pretty briefly, and we're going to go into Title VI a little bit. Now, I do show an FTA Title VI video when you do your post-award training. So that will get more in depth with everything. I'm just going to do kind of a big picture overview. So I have a lot to read here. So hopefully I don't cough. Sorry. Okay. Non-discrimination policy statement is a policy statement that assures non-discrimination to the effect that no person shall, on the grounds of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be otherwise subjected to discrimination or retaliation under any program or activity, must be signed by the head of the agency and circulated internally and to the general public. So the non-discrimination policy statement that they're talking about, how we make sure that you're meeting that is the posters that we require you to have in your vehicles and in public places. And a lot of people also have a link to them on their website, or they have them at the end of the full Title VI plan that is on the website. Non-discrimination assurances. Subrecipients must sign the US DOT standard Title VI assurances. Here, I believe they're talking about the certifications and assurances. Now, the FTA releases new ones every year, and we send those to you in DocuSign. You sign them and send them back. It's pretty easy. And they also, on their website, if you want to see how they differ from the last year's, they have a version where they like highlight everything that they've changed. So we send those to you. You don't have to worry about going and downloading them or anything like that. General non-discrimination language from the assurances must be included in all solicitations for bid or requests for proposals. Now that means if you're doing federal procurements, then you need to have your Title VI language. We do most of the procurement for you because there are so many rules. So we procure the vehicles for you and everything like that. If an item is under $5,000, then you don't have to follow as much of the federal procurement laws because it's considered a minimum purchase. But if it's over $5,000, then you have to make sure that all federal clauses and non-discrimination language and the certs and assurances and all of that are in your bid and your request for proposals and in your contracts. The clauses of Appendix A and Appendix E, I think it's talking about the circular. Oh, no. Oh, the assurances of the assurances must be included in every contract or agreement that you enter into. I just said that. They also have a form that you have to have attached if you're doing construction contracts. So that's what the assurances are. The non-discrimination coordinator. Every subrecipient must have a designated Title VI coordinator who has a responsible position in the organization with access to the head of the agency. They are responsible for, I think we'll get more into it, but they are responsible for taking the complaints and recording and all of that. External discrimination complaints. A list of all external discrimination complaints and lawsuits filed against the agency must be maintained and provided to UTA if we are passing through funding to you. The information in this list should include the identification of each complaint by race, color, sex, or national origin, the name of the complaint, the nature of the complaint, the dates the complaint was filed and the investigation was completed. I think I get more into this in another slide also. and any other pertinent information in regards to the complaint. Your external discrimination complaint processing procedures should also include a timeline for submitting a complaint. Limited English proficiency. This is a huge one, and so it probably needs a whole training in itself. We won't get too heavy into it, but we do have templates on how to create your limited English proficiency plan. LEP responsible steps must be taken to ensure meaningful access to the benefits, services, information, and other important portions of your programs and activities for individuals who are LEP, limited English proficiency. And then we'll briefly touch on environmental justice. This mainly, though, would apply to if you're doing construction projects, I think, but subrecipients must identify and address as appropriate disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects of your programs, policies, and activities on minority and low-income populations. Okay, so all of these things have to be included in your non-discrimination plan. Well, not all of these are separate. All of these things down here have to be included in your non-discrimination plan. That is your Title VI plan. Your Title VI plan also must be updated and sent to us every 3 years. So it expires after 3 years. Also, agencies who receive funding from UDOT are also required to have this plan, and they might have more requirements. I know some agencies have to get it approved by UDOT, and then they'll send us a copy. Also, if you have UDOT funded vehicles, you might have different posters for those vehicles that have UDOT's contact information, but you have to make sure that the 5310 vehicles you receive from UTA have our posters with our civil rights department's contact information and not UDOT's contact information. Because any complaints that are specific to the 5310 program, you have to notify us instead of UDOT. Okay, so this gets a little more into external discrimination complaints and your coordinator. Compliance includes developing a Title VI. Oh, did I already read? Sorry, these notes are the wrong one. You must have a designated Title VI specialist coordinator to take complaints. You must have a complaint process and complaint log. And then these are the things I already read in different words, but what you need to have in your complaint policy. Oh, what's the next one? How to file a complaint. You need policies on complaint must be filed within 180 days. The complaint should be in writing. Some people have, you'll see, I'll show you UTA's website, and we have like online forms. You could do it that way, or you could have a form that they print and fill out and give you, or they have to come in and fill one out, whatever your process and policies are. You have to have a process for determining jurisdiction, information on investigation process, instructions that complaints to the agency should be forwarded to UTA's Civil Rights Department for complaints about the 5310 program, or your vehicles if you were providing them a ride on a 5310 vehicle. Commitment to take final action within 90 days and appeal instructions. Okay. Your complaint form must include, so this is what I read before, a written explanation of what happened. It must have their contact information, the basis of the complaint. It must identify who the agency was that they allegedly discriminated and the date that it happened. And they need to have sufficient information. And subrecipients cannot investigate themselves. So you would take all of this information from your complaint form, and your Title VI coordinator would contact UTA, our Civil Rights Department, and say, we got a complaint. Here's a copy of the complaint. And then we would investigate that complaint. And I think it would at that time turn over to UTA's Title VI procedures and policies on how and when they have to resolve that complaint. So you would work with our Title VI officer on that. But you have to keep a list of all of those complaints and tell us every year if you had any. The key responsibilities of the Title VI coordinator is to provide technical assistance, guidance, and training on Title VI and other non-discrimination training. That's repetitive. Develop and disseminate Title VI information to the public. So that is our posters. We provide them in English and Spanish. Coordinate and execute Title VI educational and outreach activities. Oh, and the reason we provide them in English and Spanish is because of the LEP plan. So in Salt Lake, the data of, who lives here, that would be considered or taken into consideration when you're developing your LEP. And not all, I can't remember the percentages off the top of my head, but there's percentages that are required. If you meet those percentages of the population in your area, you're required to have everything in Spanish. Okay. I'm pretty sure our LEP template or examples that we have will explain that. But you can also just look up the LEP rules and it will explain how you calculate what languages you have to provide information in. And in Utah, it's typically English and Spanish. You must coordinate and execute Title VI educational and outreach activities. Now, UTA does a lot of that, and that's fine. You don't have to do a lot of outreach activities. Your small agencies, UTA does. UTA's Title VI coordinator does that kind of stuff. Maintain statistical data of participants and beneficiaries of federally assisted programs to ensure that minorities and other underserved groups are included in federally assisted programs and activities. Implement procedures to resolve determinations of non-compliance. I was obviously having some issues with my PowerPoint because it repeated that sentence and another one. Implement procedures from the prompt processing of Title VI discrimination complaints. Okay. Oh no, how do I go back? It won't let me copy that wallet. Okay, let me try. Okay, now I'm going to show you UTA's Title VI. Maybe. My download it. Oh, there it goes. So this is an example of UTA's Title VI. We cover a lot that you can also kind of piggyback on, but you have to have your own Title VI plan like we do. And then we have templates for that. You'll see here our language assistance plan is there. We cover different policies, like if we change service, how we deal with that, vehicle loads, vehicle headways, on-time performance, demographic data report. So you can use UTA's Title VI plan as an example and a guide. You can also copy our complaint procedures if you want. Now for public participation plan, because we do a public participation plan, you as a subrecipient are not required to do that. You come to the LCCs, you're involved in the public. We're the ones providing public transportation, so you don't have to worry about that part, but there are a lot of other parts that you do need to have in your plan. So let me show you. We have enough time? Okay, we're running out of time. But I have here on the resource page the limited English proficiency requirements. I have Title VI training, Title VI plan examples, and the notices to the public posters. So this is where you can find that information. Oops. Okay. And then I have some examples here. This is what we look at when we do our site visit or your application when you have to submit a screenshot. People have it set up different ways. I have turns here as an example and Susie's as an example. So you see that they have their posters available for download. Their Title VI plan probably has their complaint procedures in it. And then Susie also has her demand response policy on there. So you could just put all of it on one page. That's probably the easiest. And that has the statement of the EEO on there. Here's another example. This is UTA's website. So we have our EEO is on a different page, but we have a Title VI specific page that has how people complain and an electronic form. And we have the EEO officer. I think there should be the civil rights one actually, but it might go to the same inbox. So we have a civil rights at rideuta.com and an EEO officer at uta.com. We also say that you can come in person and fill out a complete form, and we have our Title VI policy on there. And then this is UTA's officers. Kenya Fail is the manager of the whole Civil Rights Department. Amanda Salmon is our Civil Rights Compliance Officer who specializes in ADA. So if you need help with your ADA plan, she is a great person to reach out to. But we also have her review your ADA plans to make sure that they are in compliance. And then Lauren Peterson is our Civil Rights Compliance Officer who specializes in Title VI and DBE, which most of you don't have to worry about. But if you ever have questions about that, you can reach out to her too. Here I just have their main inbox emails that they all can see. But if you, for any reason, need to reach out to one of them specifically, just let me know and I can give you their direct email. We try to put these more broad email addresses now on our posters because we used to have to change it every time an officer left. So instead of doing that, we're just giving out these main email addresses now. Okay. So like I said, it was a lot of information and we didn't have a ton of time to delve into it, but I hope it was helpful. In post-award training, we do more Title VI training specifically from the FTA because they made a video. But if you need help with your plans, let us know. And don't forget about all the resources that are on our website on the resources page and National RTAP's resources. Okay. Thank you everyone for attending this Lunch and Learn. Now, if you have any questions, we have a few minutes left for questions. I think I turned the Q&A on. Let me see. Nope, no questions. Okay. Let me check the chat.